Welcome everybody to this nature journaling session on drawing native berries and fruits. So I'm Bethany Milam. Welcome if you have not been to one of my classes before. I hope you have a really good time. What we are going to do is have a little bit of a look at berries, fruits, and I've added this false fruits as well, so that we can have one of our favorites in there too. And we're going to look at sort of fruit anatomy. What is a fruit? We're going to look at a few different types, and then we're going to sketch, possibly paint if you want to, a selection of different berries and fruits that grow wild in the UK. So we're going to use the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of prompts, and use a mixture of words, pictures, and numbers to journal. So let's have a look at sort of just starting ourselves off with a little bit of metadata. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically sort of setting the scene so that you know where you are, what time it is, and what's the weather doing, and anything that's going to be helpful to make you sort of feel in that present moment of, oh, look, there's a berry and I'm going to draw it. So I've basically just put today's date, sort of the high temperature of today, and well, actually, I think it's still the current temperature. It hasn't gone down much. Might be 26 by now. And then I've put a little few symbols. So at the moment, it's been sunny most of the day, but there's just been a cloud sort of working its way across the sky. So I've put a little cloud behind, and it's also pretty windy. If you hear a few sort of creaks and things, it's because I've got the window open to let some breeze in. But here we go. We've got a few little sort of windy stripes. That's how I do wind. You might depict windiness in a different kind of way, but I've got sort of I don't know, that's my strong wind or breeze kind of marks. Right, and I've also given myself a title, berries and fruits. So we've got our prepared page. If you want to include other metadata and things into your pages, I have on the side of the screen here a big sort of selection of all the kinds of things that you might include in your metadata in your own journals. You don't need to put them all down now, but this is a kind of idea that you can refer back to. So you'll have the PDFs of the slides to have a refer back to later on, and it might give you some ideas of what you can jot down. So let's go into what is a fruit? What is a berry? What are we nature journaling about today? So have a think. What's the first thing that comes into mind when you think fruit? And chances are you're thinking of a couple of things that are not fruit. So let's have a look. The botanical definition of a fruit is that it's the fleshy or dry ripened ovary of a flowering plant enclosing a seed or seeds. So in order to understand that, we need to work out where the ovary is. So if you have a look at our basic diagram of a flower over here, the central part of our flower is something a little bit like this. And this section in here is the ovary, and inside it there are little ovules, and these are what's turned into the seeds. And underneath that, I'm gonna put this in now because we'll come back to this. It's probably something called a receptacle. Hopefully I spelled that right. My dyslexic brain is looking at it going, that doesn't look right, but I'm not sure why. Right. Above there, we have the style and the stigma. So what we're looking at when we're thinking of fruit is this part that sort of maybe it expands, it becomes more fleshy, and that is the edible fruit. Now we will explore some variations on what that is. But the first thing I want to do is think, okay, if that's definition of fruit, what is the definition of a berry? And so a berry is a simple fruit formed from a single ovary, so one single ovary from a single flower. And generally, a berry can have more than one seed inside it. And so we have, if we cut through our berry, imagine we've got some seeds over here, seeds over here, and then we've got several layers through the berry structure. So the outside we have skin, and then inside of that we have a small section, maybe not so small, called the exocarp. So exo being outside and carp, I think it's standing for carpal at this point, which is another word for a sort of fruiting body. Then inside of that, there's a few little sort of veiny structures, and these are the peripheral vascular bundles. Lots of big words for you today. You don't need to remember all of them, but they are going to be inside here. And then inside of that, we have the mesocarp. And then inside of that, there is a little structure right around the seed. And this is the endocarp. Now, inside of there, we have our seed. The seed itself is going to have a skin, and inside the seed, there is going to be a little embryo, which is basically containing all of the information of how to build, grow another plant. So that is our berry. Okay, so having just sort of described those, there are some others we will look at later, but I don't want to overwhelm you all at the beginning. And that there's a lot of sort of probably new vocabulary and different things that you don't need to learn or understand or remember all of those words. But just sort of think, so a fruit, the botanical definition is that it is sort of a ripened ovary of a flower. And a berry is basically one single ovary from one single flower. So that is our definition. Okay, so let's have a look at a few little prompts to help you when you are out and about journaling, what you're going to sort of come across, what you're going to think about when you are journaling your berries and your fruits and your plants out in the wild. So I've given you a list of questions. At the top, I've probably asked a quite important question. Is it poisonous or is it an irritant? If you don't know, then do be cautious. What we can look at is then a list of questions underneath. So is it, do you know, is it a berry or is it some other kind of fruit? If you don't know, don't worry. Does it smell? Maybe what does it feel like? What does it taste like if you know for certain that it is edible? Um, does does it make a sound when you squish it, or where do the leaves make a particular sound? Um, when does it flower? When does it fruit? And what kind of habitat are you going to find it in? So does it prefer a particular type of soil, light or shade? And are you noticing any wildlife interaction? So is anything pollinating or eating the plant? And then you might want to sort of have a look, do a bit more research. Are there any particular uses of the berry or the plant? Um, so just like a little bit of a list of prompts that you can follow through if you want to. Okay, so now we are going to play a little bit of a game. So this is poison or snack. Um, if you are not familiar, this is something that the YouTuber Alexis, or as she's known, Black Forager, um, he sort of does little videos of, usually with two plants, sometimes three plants, and helps to teach in a fun way what plants are edible and which plants are poisonous in her area. So I thought that was quite a fun thing to have a little go at. I have given you quite a few more because I want to show a little bit of variety here. And there's no problem if you don't have a clue, don't worry. But just this is a bit of fun. There's no actual risk involved. It's just a photo. So you can um, take your guess. Which of these are poisonous and which of these are edible? So let's just give yourself, so I mean, you can sort of say top left, top right, just right, poison or snack in your in the little grid, and sort of give yourself give yourself a few minutes to take a really close look, get an idea, and you might be familiar with some, you may not, but have a try. And I'll just give you a couple seconds and then I'm going to start revealing them. So last few minutes to have a think, really close up look. Okay, so let's have a little look at the first one. So this is a bilberry and it is edible. So bilberries, quite a low growing shrub. They do look rather like blueberries, but they are something slightly different, but still nice and edible. Okay, what do you think about the next one? Edible or snack? Edible or poison? This one is definitely poisonous. This is bittersweet. And yeah, you don't want to be eating this at all. So poison. Next one. So these are blackthorn sloes, and I put edible with a star because you probably want to process them. You don't particularly want to eat them raw. They won't taste great. But yes, sitting in the edible section, but with a star on it. Okay, next one. What do you think? This is wild privet and it is poisonous. So have a look at perhaps the different shapes of the berries as we're going. Color doesn't seem to mean anything, so don't worry about that. But yeah, have a little look also at the leaves as we go along. Right, what about the next one? What do you think this one could be? So I'm going to reveal. This is deadly nightshade. And it is very poisonous. Deadly is in the name. So you definitely don't want to be taking a nibble out of this. If you have a look, the sepals are in a sort of star shape, which maybe makes you think of things like tomatoes and potatoes because they are in the same family. But it's one of those families where the plant is either very deadly or rather nice and tasty. So this is on the deadly side. All right, let's have a look at the last one on here. Elderberries. Who got that? Yeah, that one might have been a little bit more recognizable to some people. Elderberries, again, edible, but you generally want to process them in some sort of way. So elderberry wine, elderberry jams, you can make all sorts of things with those lovely, lovely berries. Let's have a look at our next page. So what do you think about these? Again, maybe just write yourself a little note. Which ones do you think are edible? Which ones do you think are poisonous? As you go along. And I will reveal in a moment. Okay, I think the top left is pretty obvious. This is the blackberry or the bramble, and it is edible and very delicious. What do you think about the next one along? So this is white bryony, and it is a poisonous plant. The leaves are poisonous, the roots are extremely poisonous, and the berries not good either. So again, another one to be wary of. Now, dropping down here, which one do you think this is edible or do you think this is poison? Well, I reveal this one is black bryony and it is poisonous. Although they're both called bryony, white and black bryony, they are not in the same plant family and they do look a little bit different. So that was a bit of a confusion for me, but there we go. I don't know why they're named so similarly when they are quite a different kind of plant, but there we go. They are both poisonous though, so avoid both. Right, okay, more obvious again. What do you think about this one? Of course, it's wild strawberry and it is edible. But even with these plants that are edible, there are often lookalikes that you probably don't want to be eating. So do be extremely cautious, as the warning earlier said, unless you're 100% sure, don't eat it. Get an expert. So last two. Which one is poison and which one's a snack? What do you think? Well, over on the left is the blackcurrant, probably one of my favorite berries, and it is edible. And then the last one is yew, and it's poisonous. So, how did you do? I hope no one died. But okay, it shows you a little bit of fun way that there are very poisonous berries that are edible berries, and it might not be as easy as you think to tell which is which. Okay, so let's move on to having a little look at our first plant that we're going to draw. I'm not going to tell you what it is to start off with. You might recognize it, you might not. But I want to get you to think, what do you notice about this? Maybe what questions come up? What are you wondering? Does it remind you of anything? Does it look like anything that you're familiar with? So I'm going to give you around about 2 minutes to draw, and then around about 1 minute to write some of your I notice, I wonder, and it reminds me of. So I'm starting off with drawing one of the leaves, and then I'll get to put it in the berries. And there are quite a lot of berries all in a bit of a jumble. So if you find it a bit overwhelming, you don't have to try and draw all of them. What I might do is just sort of take one berry and draw it a little bit bigger. Try and look at what's the sort of detail on the bottom. So what are you noticing? What are you wondering about this plant? You can now start to put in a few words to help you out. So I'm going to notice the color is sort of a black blue. And the little structure on the bottom perhaps is slightly more of a kind of beige color. The leaf has 3 points, and I've drawn the veins in there, but if you haven't drawn the veins, you might want to make a note get my words out in a minute, of what the vein structure is doing. Anything else you notice? I haven't done the serrations, but I might write serrated edges. And then, is there anything that you're wondering about or that it reminds you of? So add in anything that is occurring to you as you are drawing. I know what it is, so I'm not going to put anything down, but you, um, whatever is sort of coming to mind, what are you wondering about this plant? What are you thinking that it might sort of look like? Okay, so um, hopefully you've written a little bit down. You don't have to put too much. And what I'm going to do is give you now the answer of what it is. So this is the black currant. So if you want to give yourself title, and the title doesn't have to go at the top of your page. It can go anywhere. I'm going to put mine down here and in a little box. And I've given you some different information on the slide that you can add to your little sketches. So this is a deciduous shrub. I've got the plant family in here, which I'm not going to try and pronounce. I haven't had practice with that one. It can grow 1.5 by 1.5 meters or 5 feet if you prefer, and tends to grow in damp woodlands, hedgerows, riverbanks. And the other thing is that it actually, I thought it was when I started putting this together, but it's not a native UK plant. It is a naturalized plant that does grow in the wild, but also is cultivated. So I did think, shall I last minute change my mind and find some more pictures? But I didn't. But also, we have a very similar plant that is a native, which is the red currant or the white currant. I've got here out of my garden a red currant leaf and a red currant. So you can sort of see a native version as well as the black currant, which is naturalized but not native. So give you an idea of size, black currants are quite a bit bigger than the red currant. I would say it's sort of going to be maybe so much bigger between my fingers. But the leaves are quite similar. Maybe you could say sort of 5 points. And there might actually be 5 points on this, but when I was drawing, I couldn't see. It wasn't as sticking out as much. Okay. So berries, as I said, about 10 millimeters, so bigger than the red currants. And they flower between April, May, and the fruits are around between June and August. Okay, let's have a look at the leaves again. So what you can do as an idea for some of your additions into your journal is if you've got the actual leaf, there is absolutely no problem with drawing around it. And it might, when it is sort of a little bit 3D and it has all of these serrations, might be a little bit tricky to do, but it gives you the idea of the size and the shape and the structure very quickly and easily. When I say easily, this is proven a little bit of a difficult one to draw around. But there we go. You can see it, a little bit of an outline starting to appear there. And of course, the other thing that you can do is to make a rubbing of the leaf. So I'm going to stop about there. I'm going to turn it over to the veiny side. I'm taking out, is the sort of vein really prominent, or is it perhaps a little bit more subtle? Of course, if you're going to do a rubbing, you want the veins facing up. And I'm going to use a green pencil because I like, where possible, to use a color that is similar to the thing that I'm taking a rubbing of. I'm going to get a little bit of a double leaf effect here. There we go. So you can see the vein structure, and that is quite a good thing to have a go at doing if you want to try and do a more detailed sketch, is to do the rubbing so that you can see the vein structure and understand what's happening there, because it's not always easy to work out. This one, I mean, it's quite obvious because the veins are quite pale. And again, that's another I noticed. But it's not always easy to work out what the structure of the veins are in all of the leaves. Right, the other thing that we can do is if we've got the actual berry, you might want to, whoops, squish it and have a look at the seeds. Or if you've got a scalpel or sort of knife or something, you could try and cut through it so that you can get a little bit of a more controlled look on the inside. But if we've got some berry juice, then there's no problem with using that as a little bit of paint. Okay. Just very, very messy. So have a little think about being a bit creative when you are adding these things into your journal, as well as sort of doing the actual drawing side of things. So this is the red currant. Okay, so looking back at the blackcurrant leaves, you're looking at 3 or 5 lobes. So you can see the red currant leaf I chose with a swishberry on it now. It definitely has the five lobes, but you might be finding some with between 3 and 5 on these currants. They are very closely related, so they're going to look very similar. The upper side is hairless, the underside has some small hairs, perhaps a little bit more hairy on the black currants than the red currants. And when you crush the leaves, they have a really strong smell of black currant. So it again, that's another thing that makes it quite obvious. Right, so we've also got some pictures of the flowers, which are a little bit perhaps unusual looking. So we've got a structure underneath. So this is the little stem or the peduncle. And then we have the ovary in this structure above. And then there are some little curled, they might look like petals, but I believe these are the sepals. How many have I got? 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's it. I thought I've got too many here, but no, I'm just right. And then inside that, we have another little structure. So these are the petals. They are a little bit perhaps more understated, dare I say boring looking. And inside of those, you can see stamen. So again, there are 5 stamen, and then the central, I'm going to do a little magnifying glass here. So we have the inside. This is the stigma. And then around the outside, we have the 5 stamen. And so when you are drawing, if you've got teeny weeny details at any time, feel free to give yourself a little magnifying glass. You can even actually draw it as a magnifying glass if you like. So you can get a nice sort of close-up view on the tiny details rather than trying to do all those details into a very small space. Makes sense. Okay, so the flowers are extremely small. They and they are on these stems, long stem, which we're calling a raceme of flowers, which basically they are arranged in this sort of spiral pattern on a stem. And you get about 10 to 20 flowers on there, about 8 millimeters diameter. So we can again do a little here, 8 millimeters, teeny weeny. Okay, so we've got our pictures, our diagrams, we've got some words, and we've got a little bit of numbers in there. You can add more numbers if you wanted to, so make note of that it's in fives. Okay, so now we've had a bit of practice of that. Our next one, let's just go through that process again and have a think. What do you notice about this plant? What do you maybe wonder about it? What are you reminded of? So I give you around about 2 minutes to draw and 1 minute to add some questions on that. So again, I'm going to look at what do I first of all notice about this? Well, I'm noticing the sort of long stem structure and maybe sort of the shape of the leaves. So how do the berries connect to this long stem? What's this arrangement doing? So I'm also noticing that there are lots of little tendrils coming away. Have you seen those? And again, you don't need to try and draw the whole thing. You can just be comfortable with what you've got. So now write down anything that you are noticing. So noticing the tendrils, the leaves are lobed. So we've also got some berries that are more green or orange, and some berries that are red. what about the structure? What do you notice about the structure of this plant? Is there anything that you are wondering? Does it remind you of anything in particular? It reminds me of something. Well, these tendrils do. Okay, let's have a look. What have we been drawing? So this is the white bryony. So remember, this is one I showed you earlier that is highly poisonous. But it's quite interesting that it's related to cucumbers. It's in the same family, the same plant family as cucumber, Cucurbitaceae. So that's what these tendrils reminded me of. So it reminds me of cucumber. And so let's write down what it is. If you want to include also, I've put the scientific name up there for you, the plant family that it belongs to, so you can add in those information. It's a climbing sort of vine plant. And you can find it all over the place, farmland, woodland, towns, and gardens. And it flowers between May and August. So I'm going to do a little flower symbol down here and put May to August. And then I'm going to put a little fruit symbol to, well, I think it's on a different slide, write down when the berries are there. Right, so the other thing I think it's quite important to put is that it is poisonous. So somewhere, let's do it at the top. You might want to make a note of the fact that it is poisonous, it's toxic, and you definitely don't want to be eating it. So my little symbol is like just a sort of triangle warning sign, and I generally make it red. So let's use a pen to just make sure that shows up. And that's something that I use in my journal sort of all the way through. I have little symbols that I can describe certain things. The other one I've got is if a plant is native, I tend to do a little N in a square and color that green. So it's a native plant, but it is highly poisonous. And we've got flowering May to August, fruiting. Let's have a look. Oh, it's not on there. There it is. Oh, no, I haven't. Yes, I have. Wait a minute. What am I doing? I haven't put it on here. But basically, it's going to be fruiting into the winter. So late autumn to winter. I might find it on these slides in a minute. I can't see it at the moment. I thought I put it on there, but never mind. Okay, so here we go. This is actually one of my photographs, which shows you sort of it's vine like a sort of way of hanging on to other plants. So we've got some ivy behind here, and it was all clinging on to some taller trees in sort of a hedgerow area. And you can see we've got some red berries amongst the leaves. But in some places, the leaves are dying. And often what you will find in the winter is that there are just sort of brown shriveled remains of leaves and lots of berries. So this was a little bit early. I think this was October. Um, and then as the winter goes on, if there's still berries left, then there are not many leaves with them. So it might be a little bit difficult sometimes to work out what the berries belong to. Right. So a little close-up look at the leaf here. And you can see we've got the 5 lobes. Sometimes they are a little bit less shaped than this one, but they will be very sort of lobed, and that is one way that you can tell them apart quite easily from the black bryony, which has more of a heart-shaped leaf that doesn't have the lots of different lobes to it. So again, sort of basic shape. And looking at the structure of the main veins. Again, looking at the veins in leaves can be quite a good way of IDing flowers. So when you're nature journaling, especially if you're drawing something that you don't know what it is, it's quite a good idea to include a few of the main veins. And then the flowers, we'll have a close-up look at one of the flowers, but just take a note of those tendrils. They look exactly like cucumber tendrils to me. Again, how different can a tendril look? It's therefore clinging on and holding on to other plants so that the white bryony can climb up. Okay, so have a little look at the plant. In the center, we have some interesting shaped structures, which are the stamen. And it's a little bit faint to see, but in the middle there is a little teeny weeny pistil. And so around the outside, we have the petals, and it's a very sort of green flower. You don't think of flowers generally being green colored, but this one definitely is. Very pale, almost white on the outer edges, and the inside very green. So what we can do is have a little practice of bringing some color into our sketch. So what I do is often just have my tiny little paint set. It's a bit messy, I'm afraid, but that's how it is. And a water brush. So the water is contained in here, so it makes it very transportable. And I'm going to start off by putting a little bit of yellow into those stamen. And then I will use some of that to mix up some green. So I had some green already left on the palette, which is actually quite close to what I want. So let's have a look at putting a bit of that on. So what I've got in here is a very sort of basic set of colors, and the colors I've chosen allow me to mix pretty much any color I am going to need to. So I've got 2 yellows. This is lemon yellow and Windsor yellow. I've then got permanent rose, and this is transparent orange. I've got a phthalo blue and ultramarine blue, and then raw sienna and burnt sienna. And with those colors, I can pretty much mix anything that I'm going to need to when I'm out and about. So I put a little wash down, fading it out with a bit of water as I get towards the petal tips. And with watercolor, you generally work in layers, letting the first layer dry before you put on more. But I'm going to put a little bit of wet on wet here to add a bit of darkness on the inside. And then what I would do is generally leave that to dry a bit more before I would then put the veins in. But time is running on, so I'm just going to see whether I can do that over the top. It's going to spread out a little bit more than I want it to. So I'm just mixing the paint a little bit thicker. There we go. That'll do the job. And then I can put in these little veins through the petals. And perhaps just darken this up again a little bit more. So when you are using a water brush to clean it off, you generally want to be wiping it onto something absorbent. You can just use a tissue. I have these old wrist sweatbands and they're actually, because they're so absorbent, that's what they're designed to do, they are quite good for using to clean. And again, if you are out and about, you can just wear them and use that to clean your brush as you go along. Right, so that is our white briny. If you want to put a few extra notes on there, you can add some more. So maybe size. So these grow 3 to 5 millimeters in diameter. And they are pollinated by bees, and birds do eat the berries. So although they are poisonous to us, some birds are fine with eating those berries. It's not always a good clue as to what other animals and birds are eating as what we can eat, because it's a bit different. So how high does it grow? 4 meters. So or 13 foot. So these very thin stems, like thin to me, can grow reasonably tall when they are clinging on to other plants. Basically, whatever they're clinging on to, they're going to try and get to the top of it. So they also have very tuberous roots, which I don't have a picture of, unfortunately, but those roots are very toxic, but quite an interesting shape sometimes. So let's have, I think, a look at our next plant. Here we go. So this is the, well, actually, no, I'm not going to say it. I think you all know what it is, but to keep with our standard of practice of, first of all, what do you notice? What do you wonder? And what are you reminded of? Well, I think what I'm reminded of is lots of summer holidays, going out on walks and coming across a nice berry snack. Let's have a go at just drawing. Again, don't worry about trying to draw the whole thing, but choose an area or a couple of berries or a couple of leaves that you think is going to be manageable for you. Simplify, miss things out as you need to. There is no problem with that. Okay, I'm going to include a leaf, but I'm gonna get one of those ones from the top of the image and bring a little bit closer. Make that a little bit wider at the base. There we go. So we have very serrated edges. And quite deep veins. Going back to our fruit here, let's see. Again, you feel free to simplify. So I'm just going to do lots of little circles. And when you get to the outside edge, feel free to do some half circles as well. Okay, let's also notice that there are some flowers in here, and I might want to have a flower here, but I'm going to wait because I know I've got some better pictures. So if you've drawn a flower, don't worry. But I'm going to hold on drawing the flower for a moment. The other thing I'm going to notice is some of these thorns. Have you seen how prickly this plant is? Okay, so few words. I think I gave you a little bit longer there to draw. I got carried away. I'm seeing thorns. I'm seeing different colors. So black, red, and I'm just assigning colors randomly, and green. Berries in here. Well, are they berries? That's the other question. What are we looking at? This is the blackberry or the bramble. So it's native and it's edible. So do you have a symbol for a plant that is edible? I'm going to put a little fork. Very badly drawn fork in there. um, let's maybe put a little E under it for edible. You can invent your own, perhaps have a fork and knife crossed, perhaps have a spoon, I don't know, whatever you want to do. So how high does it grow? 3 to 6 meters. And I say high, but that could be across because it does like to spread, shall we say. And so we've got a thorny fruiting shrub in the family Rosaceae. So where I'm seeing these serrated edges, It does remind me of. It reminds me of rose petals. So it's the same family. And um, brambles can grow in a variety of different habitats. So you can find them in woodlands, hedgerows, gardens, shrubland, cliffs, roadside verges, any kind of waste ground. There's probably a bramble hiding somewhere with thorns for unsuspecting travelers. But it's a very dense bush, and that is good for providing protection for various birds, nesting birds, and small mammals. The flowers are an important source of nectar for insects, butterflies, bees, and then the fruits are very, very important for lots of different animals. So mammals like dormice, deer, badgers, foxes all like to sometimes snack on these berries. And of course, birds as well, so like our lovely song thrush. So lots of animal interactions, and you might want to make a note of those. I tried sometime to sort of split it up into those categories of shelter, pollen, and food. um, so and sort of assign animals, but there's so many with the blackberry that pretty much everything wants to use a blackberry plant in some form. Right. So we have white or pink flowers that appear between May and September. And then the fruit is generally around in the autumn. However, I have seen some blackberry fruits. Well, most of them are still green, but they seem to be developing now, which seems a little bit early. But there we go. Right. We also have again the sort of jagged edges and the thorns that we can use to identify the bramble. So if you wanted a closer up look at these leaves, I found a few extra photographs. Let's see what we're going to do here. I won't spend too long looking at leaves because I think we hopefully you managed to draw one of the leaves from the first one. And again, you can come back to these slides if you need to. But what I'm going to ask is, what is this? Because it's called a blackberry, but it's not actually a berry. And do you know why? Well, if we go back to what's the definition of a berry? Remember, it's one single ovary with seeds inside. So what does this look like to you? Does that look like one ovary? Well, if you're saying no, you are correct. Because actually, what we are seeing is a aggregate fruit. And it's weird that blackberry is in the name, and yet it's not a berry. It's a aggregate fruit. And that is just a fancy way of saying that it's formed from lots of little ovaries merged together. So multiple ovaries merged into one fruit. So in the flower, I've got a little diagram up. Oops, point to the right place, higher. I'm moving the pencil higher rather than up. There we go. So there's a little diagram of the flower in here. And hopefully what you can see is we've got a central part, and along that there are little ovaries on the same flower. And on top of those will be the style and the pistil. So this is where those are going to get pollinated, and then perhaps amongst them or slightly underneath them there are going to be stamen as well. So that's the central structure of our flower. This part in here is the receptacle, and then we have the sepals and the petals around that. So that's our blackberry example. Now, when this part turns into the fruit, I will try and draw it the same way up. Makes it a bit easier. What we're seeing is the receptacle is actually still attached, but it's that slightly harder part that's not exactly the fruit. We've still got the sepals at the top. And then all of these little ovaries have now merged together to form the fruit. And inside each of those is a little seed. Now, the other part of what a blackberry is it's an aggregate fruit, but it's made up of something called drupelets. So what is that? Well, a drupe is basically a fruit that has a hard stone in the middle. And when it's something that is an aggregate fruit and it's made up of very small drupes, we call them drupelets because it sounds cute. No, I don't think that's the reason, but it does. So this is an aggregate fruit composed of drupelets. So all of these are little hard stoned seeds in the middle. Okay, so a blackberry that is not a berry. And I don't know, it's fascinating. I did not know that there were quite so many different types of fruits before I started looking into it. And there are some that I still don't know what they are, what the definitions are. So there's much more to learn here. And it's really fascinating, I think. But there we go. Let's have again a little close look at that flower, and if you want to have a little go at drawing the berries a bit closer up as well, you have those available to you to draw there. So have a look at that flower first of all. I'm noticing now that we've looked at the diagram all of those tiny little structures poking up from the middle. So many little pistils, all with their own ovary underneath. And they are surrounded by the stamen. Again, many stamen. And then around those we have the petals, and there are 5 petals. They have a little notch in the center. And as I said, sometimes they will be more pink and sometimes they are very white in color. Okay, and then behind there, we can't quite see them, that there are the sepals um, that will be just, if you had it, if you can move it around, they would just be visible a little bit in the gaps between the petals. If we look closely at the blackberry, we can notice these little segments. They're not perfectly round, as I've put in my sort of quick sketch, but they are a little bit shaped, a little bit more angular. So have a little close look at those. You might notice that some perhaps have not become quite as large. And we get some smaller little shapes amongst the larger ones. And the other thing that people, when they're trying to add color into the blackberries, find tricky is sort of just getting the right kind of texture, the bloom on them. Actually, before I demonstrate putting a little bit of color on, I'm just going to say, have you noticed that also the pistil is still attached? So each of these little segments is still attached to a tiny little pistil. You can, so it's a slightly fluffy berry, not quite, but it's still got that little stem or style on there. Now, okay, let's go back to color and bring this over. And what I do with this tiny set is, because often I run out of space, I actually just use the side, the wood, to mix a bit of extra color. It's probably not the best thing to do, but for me it works. You just got to remember where you put your bits of color, so that you don't end up with getting your paints sort of muddy and messy looking. Right, so I'm starting off a little bit more purpley, and I'm putting a little bit of variation in here because often some of them have a little bit more one color than the other. And what I'm going to do is look at where the highlight is positioned and make sure that I am getting some white paper left showing through where I want to have a highlight. I'll just do those 4. And what I want to do is generally at this point wait for that to dry before I come back with another layer. So what I'm going to do is leave this one to the side for a moment while we have a look at our last set of pictures. So I'll leave that to dry a little bit. Okay, so last one. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What are you reminded of? Have a little go at a quick sketch. We will come back to the same image, so you'll have time to draw it again a little bit later. So choose what part do you want to draw? You probably can't draw the whole thing unless you're extremely speedy. Find the berry that you like the look of and find a leaf. Okay, so what do you notice? What do you wonder? And what are you reminded of? Make yourself some notes. So I'm noticing how bumpy it's looking. And I'm wondering whether these are lobes or serrated. I'm also noticing that both these are coming from the one main stem. So let's say branched from main stem. Sorry, my dyslexia is making making me work here. That should be a P. And okay, anything else that you notice? Anything that you are wondering about? Or does it remind you of anything? Okay, so we are looking at the wild strawberry. And this again is part of the Rosaceae family. It is native and it is edible. The flowering season is between April and July. Again, it's going to vary depending on where you are and what weather you are getting. And You can find them in hedgerows, grassland, limestone banks, chalk downland, woodland, and scrub. And they are actually classed as near threatened in England. So again, I tend to abbreviate the classifications. Sort of endangered is an E, near threatened is NT. And again, I like to put them in little boxes. So I'm going to do that as well. I think I also use color coding, but I can't remember what color I use for near threatened. So let's look it up in my journal. I think, yeah, okay. So I'm using at the moment, this is the one I had to keep sort of thinking about. I'm using yellow, but with green surrounding it. So yeah, that's why I couldn't remember, because it's two colors. And this is, again, this is my little journal here, and I got a code that I sort of use. You can see here, poisonous, toxic. I've already sort of explained that one. This one I've just put red around the outside, but sometimes I fill it all in. Native, my little N in a green box. So I make myself a little code, and like with this one, if I forget what I'm doing, I can refer back to it in the front of my book. So if you want to invent your own little symbols that you'd like to use, absolutely go for it. You don't have to do the same as I've chosen, or any other nature journaling teacher chooses. Invent your own, what works for you. And that way you can make it sort of personal and hopefully remember it a little bit better. Okay. So what else? They can grow up to 30 centimeters tall. I think generally you're going to see smaller plants than that, but that's the maximum height, and they have been consumed by humans since the Stone Age. We have a long relationship with strawberries, and we have actually modified them, cultivated them in different ways, so that the strawberry that you're probably finding on your supermarket shelf or in your farm shop is going to look a little bit different. For a start, it's going to be much bigger, and perhaps a little bit less bumpy, and it's probably going to taste quite a bit sweeter than these ones do. So the wild strawberry, a little bit varying texture, I've been told. And even so, they are important for wildlife. So if you are seeing wild strawberries and you are, again, being careful, you know exactly what you're picking, make sure you do leave some behind, because they are eaten by a variety of mammals and birds. So deer like to nibble them, mice, slugs even, and they are also useful for bumblebees, solitary bees, hoverflies that like to drink the nectar from the flowers. And there are also some butterflies and moths that use the leaves as a food plant for their caterpillars. So again, a very useful plant, lots of different uses for various wildlife. And if you want to make a note of some of those, then go for it, please do. A little note about the leaves. Again, glossy green leaves with 3 lobed leaves and toothed edges. So I'm going to answer my question here. Is it lobes or is it serrated? It's actually called toothed. But where the lobes come in is, I haven't drawn, is there will also be a leaf over here and a leaf over here, so behind that strawberry. There we go, on the stem. Now, they can be confused with other plants, in particular the barren strawberry, which maybe you don't want to be eating. So again, do be careful that you know exactly what you're seeing. Now, oh, this next one, we were talking about the blackberry not being a berry. I'm going to ask you a question. What is a strawberry? If you said berry, you are not correct. You're wrong. If you said it's a fruit, you're also incorrect. So, well, kind of. The strawberry itself, the whole thing we think of as a strawberry with that nice inside, is not a fruit, and it's not a berry. It's a false fruit or an accessory fruit. So this takes a little bit of explaining, and I have given you a diagram, so hopefully make it a little bit clearer. So we've got our fruit. Here we go. Now you're seeing double, but this one I'm going to point to. Now, okay, we've got what we think of as the fruit body not actually being a fruit, because this is the receptacle that has become sort of fleshy, and this is not the ovary. Okay, where the ovaries have turned into fruit are these little outside bits. Are you confused yet? Well, hopefully this will make it a little bit clear if I show you the flower. So we've got our petals, our sepals down here. This is the receptacle, which is the inner part of our flower. And then on the outside of that, like the raspberry, we have little structures that are ovaries with the pistil on the outside sticking up in sort of multiple different directions. And interspersed with those, we also have the stamen, but actually I've drawn them a little bit high up. They should be sort of more at the base of this structure, not up here. I got carried away. But we've had stamen in here as well. So we have actually, let's bring up some words on that slide as well. We have these structures, the pistil and ovary. If we look closely at that, at this point, it's an ovule, style, and stigma we're seeing. What happens when this turns into the fruit, into the strawberry, is that this part, the receptacle, becomes the flesh. And therefore, because it's a receptacle and not an ovary, it isn't technically a fruit. And then these little parts that we think of generally as seeds are not the seed as such. The seed is inside it. So this is what's known as an achene, and this is basically a type of fruit. So this is a dried fruit. So when you say strawberry is not a fruit, actually the middle part is not a fruit. These things on the outside are many fruits. And what we're seeing here is that we have the ovary as our fruit. Inside of it, there's going to be a seed, and often the style and the stigma is still attached to this as well. So in fact, you can do a little style and stigma on the outside of these. So in actual fact, our strawberry is called an aggregate accessory fruit. So accessory means that the fruit contains tissue from parts other than the ovary. And aggregate again means that it is multiple merged ovaries that have been separated in a single flower. So these little things are the fruits. The main body of the strawberry, not a fruit. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense when you hear strawberry is not a fruit. So again, you can see close-up view, you can see the stigma and the style poking out. And then the slightly greenish color part, that is the outside of the ovary or the fruit part. And then inside of that is going to be a seed. Okay, so if you would like to have a sketch of either the fruit itself or the flower, you can add that into your page. And yeah, and then we'll go back to having a very quick go at adding anything you want to do into this drawing. We'll go back to that picture, and we'll also go back hopefully and have a look at adding a bit more watercolor into our blackberry. So what are you seeing with this flower? Well, hopefully you're looking at this center part and noticing how it sort of domes upwards. So underneath all of these tiny little pistils is the receptacle. And then we're seeing the stamen quite flat, I'm noticing. Flat anthers on the top of these stamen. Again, many around the outside. And then again, we have 5 petals. 5 petals is quite common for the Rosaceae family. If you struggle, like I've just done now, to get your petals equally positioned, I think 5 is actually one of the hardest numbers to work with, but you can use sort of a geometric shape underneath your structure to help you, rather than, as I've done here, sort of going around the outside. So if it was, say, 6 petals, you could use a little star made up of 2 triangles, and wherever you've got the point can be then the point of your petal. So it's a little sort of structure, help you place things a little bit more evenly. But 5 petals means you've got to draw, oh dear, a 5-sided star without squidging it one direction or the other too much, which sometimes easier said than done. So again, you can use the point to position where each of the petals should be. Okay, so let's have a quick look back at this image, and if you want to add some more detail or think about putting some color in, then absolutely have a go at doing that. What I notice is that around the little arcane, the little fruits, there's often either an indent or an area that is lit up perhaps a little bit more, so it's catching more of the light. You get this kind of white highlight effect. So what I would do here is sort of using pencil at the moment. I like to switch between my media. Is look at creating some outlines of where I perhaps want to keep a little bit more light, and then start to fill in areas that are a bit darker. I won't do the whole thing, but show you the kind of technique. I'd layer up, then going a little bit more red, and look for where is it darker? Where do I want to fill in more color? Again, and where do I want to leave those areas of white, or are they actually light pink now? There might be some white, there might be some light pink you're noticing. And then building up on top of that, where is it really dark? And what I would tend to do with this is perhaps take a little bit more time than I'm doing now, but sort of just build up layer and layer, and think about where I'm introducing the colors and the tones in particular. So now I'm putting a little bit of dark onto each of these bumps to make them stand out a little bit more, so it looks a little bit more three-dimensional. And I'll notice then where are there a little bit more shadow, sort of shadowed areas in between those, and where do I want to again keep those highlights so don't accidentally fill that in, but just work in between those. And again, that's very, very quick, but that is how I would start to sort of just build things up. And when you get to this stage, you might want to go even darker into some of those shadowed areas. So you could bring in a purple into the shadows. I like sometimes to use sort of a dark indigo if there is a particularly dark shadow. So underneath the sepals, it does go quite dark. That might be where I would introduce a very dark blue as a bit of a shadow color, but hopefully you can see how that starts to look a little bit more three-dimensional, just with concentrating on those light shapes and building up the dark shapes around them. Okay. So we have run over time. So what I'm going to do is go back to that blackberry very, very quickly and just show you it. I mean, it has dried reasonably dark. Sometimes your watercolor dries a little bit lighter than you expected it to, but this is all right. So what I would want to do now is to actually make a sort of blue-black color. I'm going to do that using my burnt sienna and my ultramarine blue mixed together. New little test. So get it nice and dark in there. And then I'm going to use that in the sort of the ridges or sort of the gaps in between them, not exactly gaps, but where they are pressed close together. First of all. And then I will look, is there anywhere that I'm seeing around the outside edges, even if you've got one that's on the outside, is it darker anywhere? And start to fill it in a little bit more there as well. I'm going to put a little bit more water into that mix. So now we're I think I'm going to put a little bit more blue in there as well. So we can get something a little bit more like that. And then I'm going to put in some of the shadows into the body of each of these little structures, and just get a little bit of a softened look between those inner parts, and then where the each little segment is catching the sun a teeny bit more. I can also, if I want to, introduce a little bit more color. So if any of yours is turned a little bit too pink or too blue, you can go over the top with some of the either the red or blue. And then last of all, working into the highlights, I might just, with a clean brush, encourage some of my watercolor to go up into the highlight a little bit more so that I soften the edges. I don't want it to travel too far into my highlight, but I just want to soften the edge and make some of the surrounding color come into the highlight a teeny bit. Again, just make sure that you clean your brush in between doing each of those. And then again, hopefully you can see how that is creating a much more three-dimensional look to your painting. If you're using a different media, if you're using the colored pencils, it's the same principle that you want to be working with your lighter colors, leaving your highlight and then going darker and introducing those shadows. So there we go. Hopefully you have enjoyed drawing along with me and learnt a little bit about some berries, fruits, and false fruits in our journaling session today. So I've got my normal list of useful links on the screen now, and I'll say thank you for watching, thank you for joining in, and if you want to come to a future workshop in August next month, we are going to be looking at native lizards, which is going to be great fun. I absolutely adore our reptiles, and so hopefully you can join me for that. All of my upcoming workshops are on my ticket source page. You can get to it from my website as well. And I also have recorded workshops in a sort of online library that you can go and purchase, or the nature journal sessions you can download for free. So feel free to look through. I've got lots of different subjects on there that you might enjoy. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. Hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you for another workshop soon.